Well, hi there, everybody. I've got an unusual topic here for you today. I'll try to keep it short, mostly for the purpose of saving my voice, and so you won't have to listen too much to a deep-throated version of me. So I've been doing quite a bit of reading recently about, of all things, salesmanship. There's a book I've been reading that's quite well known, actually, apparently, called Fanatical Prospecting. And you're probably looking at this and starting to roll your eyes and thinking, who wants to read any advice for, some dude going door to door selling, whatever it is, life insurance, or what do they do around here? They sell the bugs spray outside, right? Because you don't want to have bugs outside. I actually prefer to have them outside. We learned because we bought into that one year, and it was a lot of money for a guy to come over with a hose and spray around. And all the stories I could tell you about all the foolish things that we've done, that's kind of what makes life fun, all the mistakes you make. But I tell you, this book about salesmanship really actually got me thinking about baseball simulations and about the way that things go. You'll remember that we talked before about advertising for these games and the fact that advertising is low. Now, the truth is that baseball simulators are really not the sort of thing that you can sell well, like one-on-one, right? I mean, if somebody were to call me on the phone and ask me if I wanted to try to play like some Strat-O-Matic or something, I would think that they're nuts, right? So that's probably not going to be the effective approach. But having said that, there has to be some way, for the good and the sake of the hobby, that we can engage in meaningful discussion with people about these kinds of games. I'll put it to you this way, right? I know bits and pieces about sabermetrics, right? There's a lot of stuff that I don't know. There's a lot of stuff I still need to read up on, and I'm hoping to do so that I can talk with you about it, because I find it really interesting, right? But I do know that many sort of higher level thinkers in terms of baseball baseball statistics and statistical manipulation will come up with very, very primitive simulations of the game to try to test out their ideas. I know that that's very, very problematic. And the problem that you have is that baseball in simulation world, where we take the mathematics, we take a formula, we put it together, and we predict about what will happen, is 100% different from actually sitting down and playing out the games, right? There's a reason why we play out the games together, because we can see as we play these out that, certain things tend to happen if we play one way versus playing another way, right? Think about 1908, which you'll see again tomorrow, right? When I bunt a lot in 1908, we end up not having so many runs and not having so many base hits. But sometimes when it's like that Giants-Phillies game yesterday, when I'm like, okay, yeah, let's let these guys swing away, see what happens, all of a sudden they're getting base hits left and right and doing this and doing that and so on and so forth, right? It very, very well may be the case that despite, all the talk about the dominance of pitching in 1908, that perhaps there was something about the hitter's strategic approach that might have caused hitting to go down. It's really, really hard to adjust for things, and it's hard to look at it and to say definitively, aha, 1908 was a pitcher's era because guys were bunting too much, right? It's a hard sort of thing, that sort of chicken and egg argument that comes when we're talking about what causes offense to go up or offense to go down, right? One of the other problems you'll have with 1908, by the way, that nobody thinks about is if you look at it from the 1908 perspective, nobody's looking at this saying, oh my gosh, this is the worst of the worst and this is the worst offense of all time, because they have no idea what's going to happen in 1909 or 1910, right? We tend to forget about that. That's a completely different concept that I'm slightly familiar with in history, which is that it's one thing to look at some historical event like a baseball season from today, from the modern perspective. It's another thing to try to approach it as if you were in the season itself, looking at things from that point of view. And that's the sort of thing that people don't necessarily like to play around with all that much, unfortunately. The cool thing, though, about these simulators is that you can test out some theories and you can try some different things and see what happens, right? Now, it's only as good as your simulator is designed. So if somebody takes out-of-the-park baseball, there was a time probably about 2 years ago where I thought about doing a project on my own where I would take out-of-the-park baseball. And you remember that famous trade that was rumored up front, Joe DiMaggio for Ted Williams, right? Out of the park baseball, I grabbed that and went back to, I think it was 1939, wanted to find a season where both players were playing and where they were good. I think it was either 39 or 40. I did the straight swap. I was in charge of the Red Sox in game, so because you choose one of the teams, and I thought, okay, we'll see what happens. Maybe this will help the Red Sox win the World Series. And you can play in out of the park and ignore the Warriors as well, so they would play straight. And of course, the assistant manager told me this is a really bad deal for us from the Red Sox perspective, and it actually is in Out of the Park Baseball, because in part of the way that the neutralization engine works, but also really in part due to their statistics. It probably would be the case that the Yankees would have been a lot better with Ted Williams than with Joe DiMaggio, right? If you try that experiment yourself and use pretty much any game engine, I'm pretty sure you will find that Williams ends up playing extraordinarily well. Now, I say Out of the Park Baseball specifically because I happen to know from forum posts and from messing around with this myself that if you use the neutral error, you don't use the official transactions and all that stuff, Ted Williams, once he gets those Warriors back, will end up being the best hitter in baseball history, and that does include Barry Bonds. I know because I've tried this before. I've played around with this. You can play around with it yourself if you have OOTP, but I guarantee that's what's going to happen. If you play in one of those redraft leagues and you wind up with Ted Williams, you're going to win the pennant because he's that good. Anyway, that's a little bit off the subject, but it is sort of an example of the kind of question, the kind of problem that a baseball simulation can solve and can work with. It would be nice if somebody somewhere in the sabermetrics world or in the world of talking about these statistics were to talk about that. And so instead of being like, oh, I set up my own baseball simulation to simulate a whole bunch of games at once, ignoring little things like injuries, transactions, guys being sent down, all that other stuff, right? You might get one result, right? But if we're going to do this the right way, we have to have all of those variables turned on like it's an actual season, go through with it, see what it's like, and hopefully put it on YouTube and put up a blog about it and keep a whole bunch of records and stats so that we can look at it and we can talk about it, we can dissect it, we can share it with each other, right? That's what this really should be used for. It should be used for testing out theories, trying different things, trying crazy things, and talking about it and getting a whole bunch of people to play, right? I don't know if that's an effective marketing approach or not, but I do know that when you're dealing with people on other baseball message boards, ones that are not dedicated to simulators, it might be a good thing to come around once in a while and to say, hey, it's an interesting idea. Let me show you about the project that I ran in which I tried something similar, or let me show you what it's like with this certain game or something like that. Just a little bit of food for thought, right? There's not like necessarily a brick wall between the world of, sabermetrics and all of this stuff. Actually, as we're going to see once I finally get my life in order and we get around to it, a lot of early baseball statistical ideas, not really early stuff, but stuff like from the 60s, mostly was spread in the pages of papers or of newsletters like the APBA Journal, right? Earnshaw Cook, for example, I actually have not been able to find an electronic copy of his famous work about baseball statistics from the mid-60s. But if you read the old pages of the APBA Journal, it's all about Earnshaw Cook all the time, not long after he publishes. And I mean, there's years worth of content there, right? So before, Bill James came along, a lot of these guys were kind of hanging out in the APBA or the Strat crowd and were messing around with a lot of this stuff. It's really fascinating. And then at some point in time, the two worlds separated, and this world, the simulation world, ended up being being dominated by a bunch of old fogies like me, and then all the cool kids went over to the simulation side of stuff. So maybe there's something we can do to bring the worlds back together. I think that there must be something though that we can do, and I'm hoping that in the future we can see these simulators and other games become more popular, not only for my own sake, but honestly to sort of keep a part of this culture and this world alive. I'll tell you this. I used to have a pretty sizable collection of the APBA Journal. I think it was straight and complete going back to 1974. So it'd be 1974 through maybe 1997 or something like that. Pretty large. And I knew I had to get rid of it, right? Thank you to Mary Kondo and to the Mary Kondo method, but we had moved around. We've moved around internationally. And after a while, you're like, why do I have this thing, right? But it broke my heart to get rid of it because I thought there's a lot of really good stuff in there that should be passed on. I don't want to put it in a landfill. And the problem is you go try to sell it on eBay, nobody wants it. Part of it is because everybody can get the electronic copy available, right? I ended up selling off my old APBA card collection, and for every year, if I had the 76 season or something, I included all the APBA journals from that year as well, so you could read up on what was happening. And that was probably kind of a nice bonus for whoever won the auctions. But does kind of make me feel sad about this. My hope is that at some point in time, you'll see a resurgence in this type of game so that all of this interesting and fun stuff from the past can continue to live, right? My biggest fear is that it'll all become some big footnote in history, not for monetary value, but rather because there's a lot of really good stuff that's been in the community that would then be completely missing. And that would be a major shame. So here's hoping that we can do something. Talk with people if you know people in baseball circles and let them know about these games. And let's see if we can't help a few more people discover this world and have some fun with us. And with that, I'll talk with you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.